I forecasted that we would be loosening some of the restrictions in terms of our business community, whether it relates to restaurants and bars or our retail establishments. I shared at that time that it was important to note the level of success that the city of Jackson has had in terms of this response. Not only have we put together a comprehensive effort that has not only provided more tests to our residents and first responders, and even those who are currently confined in the Hinds County Jail, we've also purchased a symptom collector to be better able to gather the data of where this virus is disproportionately affecting our city. We've purchased hotel rooms for those that have an inability to rest their heads and at the same time safely quarantine and not infect those that are in their family or those who may not have a place to rest in the normal day and are infected. So we have looked at this in the most comprehensive way that we could. And the results, we believe, have spoken for themselves. While the city of Jackson has the highest number of cases, and this is expectedly so, because the city of Jackson is the most densely populated city in the state of Mississippi by a factor of 3. Our infection rate for the state of Mississippi is actually one of the lowest infection rates statewide, and our death rate is one of the lowest death rates statewide. Additionally, our rate of infection and our death rate for cities of comparable size still places us around one of the lower infection and death rates nationwide. And so we're proud of these efforts, and we think that these efforts are directly related to the proactive steps that we have implemented as a city. But at this time, the reason that I stand before you prepared to relax some of the restrictions is because we now have the governor's order that has enabled businesses to open up around us. And so that brings the question whether our continued efforts at social distancing is more of a notion or a reality. When you have the city of Jackson, in effect, becoming an island where businesses and places of public gathering are open up to the north, south, east, and west of us, that now places us in position where there's little that we can do to stop Jackson residents from going to Clinton or Byram or Pearl or Flowood or Madison or Ridgeland in order to go to these places and then come back in the city. And so it merely means that, one, we are very likely unable to continue our measures on an island, but it also means that it merely becomes a punitive measure for those businesses. Furthermore, as I spoke to last week, there has been a great deal of confusion amongst those businesses in the city as to whether they are to abide by the mayor's order or by the governor's order. And some businesses have now elected to open up out of that confusion, and in some cases, a blatant disregard. And so there are more businesses to police now in terms of whether they are open or closed. And so all of those factors considered, while this may not be the measure that I would implement based on where the data has us at this time, there is little choice, and in many regards, our hand is forced. And as opposed to having businesses open up in violation, doing it the way that they see fit across the city, we are electing to have an organized process by which we open up safely and to the best of our ability to keep people safe. From day one, the question that we have been balancing has been, how do we protect the safety and health of our citizens while simultaneously operating an economy in the presence of COVID-19? And so with that, I would like to call Mr. David Lewis to the podium to speak to you about recent discussions that we have had with our business community and there will be a few other people who will come forward to share information with you. Thank you. Mr. Ricky Thickpen will actually come forward first with Visit Jackson. Thank you.
Good afternoon. This plan has been developed utilizing data and expertise from industry professionals. They represent the business, education, tourism, city government, development, practicing medical practitioners, and medical researchers. This dedicated group has worked to craft a plan that first keeps the citizens of Jackson and those that do business in the city safe and healthy. The plan was also crafted to help reopen business in Jackson, Mississippi's capital city, in a thoughtful manner. It is our goal that this plan will not be just a flash in the pan, but has the propensity to be effective for the long term. This plan not only provides some regulations, it also provides resources and a support system that helps our business community be successful during this, our phase 1 of reopening. David.
Thank you all for being here. My name is David Lewis. I'm Deputy Director of Human and Cultural Services with the City of Jackson. As Ricky explained and the Mayor explained, we wanted to make sure that what we did with this phased reopening was provide us spaces that could be safe for our citizens within the parameters that we're working with. We wanted to provide a very well-formulated and structured set of guidelines and requirements to best ensure the safety of Jacksonians in a phased reopening scenario. We focus on how these 5 core actions affect the operations of various industries, and we will take the time now to spell out how each of those industries will then be affected by this phased reopening. We are still drafting a bit of this, but all of the industries that are open, their guidelines and requirements are available online through the city's website, jacksonms.gov/slow-open. And we have individual industries spelled out. So first, I'd like to take a little bit of time to talk about the 5 core actions, and these are things that are derived from CDC guidelines and state guidelines regarding social distancing that are then affecting each industry and retail or restaurant. So first we have social distancing. So please maintain 6 feet of distance between other people when you are in public places. The rule of thumb is farther is better. This is if you're in line, if you're in a store, if you're outside, if you're running, please keep 6 feet between each other. And in phase 1, no more than 10 people maximum in gatherings. We want to continue to push the usage of cloth face coverings. This can be a mask, a scarf, something to cover your nose and face. This is intended to allow you to keep your neighbor safe and for your neighbor to keep you safe. Proper hand washing. The CDC recommends washing your hands with soap or water for 20 seconds. You can hum the chorus of Truth Hurts by Lizzo. And when you cannot have soap or water, please use a hand sanitizer that contains at least 60% alcohol. And this is for after being in public spaces, touching common surfaces like gas pumps or doorknobs. The 4th item is cleaning surfaces. Regularly disinfect surfaces with soap and water or EPA-regulated household disinfectants to prevent transmission. And then finally, we still recommend that the citizens of Jackson in non-essential travel instances, or the best that they can, please do stay home and stay safe. The first industry that we'll kind of spell out will be retail. And retail will, as effective with this order, will remain open with, or will be open with restrictions. Retail businesses include all businesses that sell goods or services directly to the consumer. General requirements for retail are as follows. Continue to follow the guidance for all employers, which is available online. Employees must wear face coverings when tolerated medically and physically, when social distancing of 6 feet between individuals can be consistently maintained. Customers are required to wear face masks, face coverings when tolerated medically and physically, when social distancing of 6 feet between individuals cannot be consistently maintained. We limit the number of customers, excluding employees, to 5 customers per square foot. And there are some directions online that will be available for business owners to help calculate that very quickly. Points of sale registers must be at least 6 feet apart. Sampling of food or products is prohibited. Services requiring the removal of a client's face covering are prohibited. General recommendations for retailers follows. Continue following the general recommendations for all employers. Encourage customers to use hand sanitizer upon entering the store. Provide an adequate number of trash receptacles. Use distance floor markers to encourage social distancing of 6 feet. And again, those, if any retailer or business needs access to those, we do have some graphics online. Use one-way aisle markers where aisles are preventing social distancing of 6 feet, and those resources are online as well. Add plexiglass protective barriers for employees working registers. Close or sanitize changing rooms or similar shared use rooms between customers. Conduct daily temperature checks of employees and restrict employees from entering the work site if they have a fever. Screen employees daily with the following questions and restrict employees from entering the work site if they've answered yes. There's a list of questions here. And with that, I'd like to say that the guidelines for gyms and salons are basically replicated almost entirely from the states. There will be further information online about that. And with that, I'm going to hand it back to Ricky Thigpen to speak about restaurants.
Thank you, David. As we reopen Jackson's restaurant in-house dining capabilities, in many ways this plan undergirds the best practices from national, state governing authorities and those restaurant associations. Our Jackson restaurant industry comprises many national award winners, chefs, and generation of food experts who are not willing to compromise their customers' health, their personal standards, nor their dedication to the city of Jackson. In fact, late last week, the industry came together in a proactive posture to unveil its own industry standards that are in concert with the City of Jackson's Phase 1 reopening process. While I would not read all of the requirements, again, they are all available online, but we would ask the restaurants to continue following the 5 core areas that we have adopted, asking employees to wear face coverings. Customers must wear face coverings when they are not seated at a table. Prior to in-house dining, the restaurant and bar must be open to public, will be cleaned, deep cleaned, disinfected, and sanitized. Restaurants and bars shall set hours to be closed to the public no later than 10 p.m. Restaurants and bars shall conduct daily screening of employees, asking those questions that we have become familiar with regarding their health. Customers shall be screened for illnesses upon their interest by asking questions or posting of signs about their health. We will conduct daily temperature checks for employees and restrict employees from working if they are ill or have a fever. All employees shall report any symptoms of COVID-19 to their supervisor. Workstations shall be staggered 6 feet to avoid standing next to each other, and break rooms should be thoroughly cleaned and sanitized. We should limit the number of customers sitting at a table to 6. No seating at the bar or counter. Restrictions from congregating in common areas. All front of house high contact surfaces shall be sanitized at a minimum every 2 hours. Menu boards are recommended, but if single menus are used, they should be sanitized between each customer's touch. Self-service buffets, food stations, and drink stations are prohibited. Cafeteria-style buffets and food stations are prohibited with appropriate barriers in place. Hand sanitizer shall be placed at all points of entry and exit, the host-to-hostess station, in the bathrooms or near the cashier station. Again, there's a full list of these requirements on the City of Jackson's COVID-19 support resource page.
Tim Howard, City Attorney. I will reiterate the major changes that are going to take place to go into effect Saturday, May 16th. All individuals living in the City of Jackson are encouraged to stay at home or in their place of residence when not engaged in permitted activities as delineated in the Stay Safe Jackson order, which will be on the website by Thursday. Individuals must continue to maintain distancing of a minimum of 6 feet between each other and shall avoid gatherings in groups of more than 10 people. All individuals who are over the age of 2 and who are able to medically and physically tolerate a face covering shall be required to cover their face when in public, indoor and outdoor, and work, unless medical or physical exceptions apply or industry standards prescribe against the wearing of a mask. All vulnerable individuals and those who have serious underlying conditions are especially encouraged to stay at home. Except as otherwise provided in the Stay Home, Stay Safe Jackson order, all businesses and nonprofits operating in the city may reopen subject to strict guidelines and limitations as delineated in the order. Restaurants and bars may resume in-house dining subject to strict guidelines and limitations as delineated in the order. Beauty shops, barber shops, and other personal care and grooming facilities may reopen subject to strict guidelines and limitations as delineated in the order. Fitness and exercise gyms may reopen subject to strict guidelines and limitations as will be delineated in the order that you will be able to find on the city's website by Thursday. Non-contact sports may resume subject to strict guidelines. Contact sports are still prohibited. Swimming pools will be allowed to open if robust safety protocols are in operation and pools are adequately supervised by individuals knowledgeable of those protocols. Theater houses shall remain closed. Places of amusement and attractions will remain closed as they are high-touch places. Essential businesses may remain open but must adhere to social distancing requirements and the wearing of masks when distancing cannot be maintained unless medical or physical exceptions apply or industry standards prescribe against the wearing of a mask. Those are the main changes. However, you will be able to find all of the detailed information within the Stay Safe Jackson order by Thursday on the Jackson website. Thank you.
As we continue to mention, you can find all of these details on the city's website, and we encourage people to go there because out of an abundance of caution, because we know that not everyone will do their due diligence. I do want to emphasize as it relates to barbershops and beauty salons and nail parlors that it must be by appointment only. The beauticians, the barbers must wear a facial covering and gloves while they give service to the person who is in their chair, and they still have the social distancing requirements from chair to chair, and they can only be by appointment. So there should be no one sitting in a waiting area waiting to their turn, that they should come only when it is time for their appointment. I want to take the opportunity before we take on any questions to share some gratitude, express some gratitude for those that have been helping the city of Jackson throughout the course of this pandemic. People like Dr. Dobbs, Dr. Hayes, who have offered support from the state in terms of information, a data sharing agreement that we now have, we are looking forward to being put in place so that we can get to the street level of disproportionate effect on our communities and have the appropriate and adequate response based on that. I'd like to thank all of those who have served on the COVID-19 task force for the city. Not only the medical experts, those that have expertise in the area of business development and economic development, those that represent areas of our city such as education. All of their contributions have been valuable and continue to be needed as we offer more regulations or reduce the regulations over time. And I want to be clear that at the first sign that we are experiencing a great boost or any concern with a rise in our numbers that is significant, we will be prepared to reimpose regulations as we deem necessary. And so I want to be clear on that. And once again, just remind you that if this were the way that I imagined it, the way that the data imagines it, and the way that the experts have advised us, then this might not be the time that we would be looking at opening up. But based on all of the surrounding factors, we feel that this is the best option available to us, and so we wanted to do it in an organized fashion. If you have any questions, we are prepared to answer those. And let me say this. We also, I said earlier when we had the stay-at-home order, that the stay-at-home order in effect was meant to be a 24-hour curfew unless you had an essential purpose to leave the house. Now that we are taking down that stay-at-home order because so many areas of our economy are now open, we will be imposing a curfew between the hours of 11 p.m. to 5 a.m. 11 p.m. to 5 a.m. And so if you have any questions, we're ready to answer those questions. I'll start here and work my way to the right.
How will the city be inspecting these businesses, and will there be enforcement if businesses don't follow the protocols?
Yes, as I have mentioned time and time again, a great deal of the measures that we implement rely on personal discipline and the discipline of these businesses. However, where those individuals see fit not to abide in a blatant disregard, then our police department will be notified, and our planning department will receive information which is actionable to go out to those businesses and issue citations. We cannot be everywhere all the time, and we recognize that. And so that is why we call on the discipline of our business community. We call on the personal responsibility and discipline of our constituents as well. They've been doing a good job of notifying us when people are in violation. And all in all, the city of Jackson has been doing an excellent job of stopping or containing the rate of infection. And so we ask people to still do that. My standing here and the people who are standing with me in no way represents that we are beyond COVID-19. In no way do we have information that this threat is past us. And so we want people to still remain vigilant and remain responsible in the midst of this pandemic. I saw another hand right here. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to go back on the restrictions for restaurants. There is some restrictions in regards to them opening up, but it still says under general guidelines for everyone, gatherings of more than 10 people are prohibited. So how exactly can restaurants work around that if no more than 10 people could be in their dine-in area?
Restaurants can see fit to work around it by adhering to those. Before, everyone had to be to go, right? And people cycle in and out. And so the restaurant's requirements is that they maintain the 6-foot social distancing. And it's also required based on their square footage. The reason that we chose a square footage requirement, and the question, because not all of the microphones can hear the question was how do restaurants abide by the restrictions that we have implemented based on the 10-person maximum and the other guidelines. And so that's what I'm speaking to. So the square footage is the measure that we felt was the best to implement because not every business knows what their occupancy rate is. In fact, early on when the governor implemented his order, we had a number of businesses calling our planning department asking what their occupancy rates were. So not only would it be a burden on our planning and development department in order to research each particular business's occupancy rate, it would also require those employees to be aware of the number of people in based on that occupancy rate at any given period of time, and that is a very difficult thing to accomplish. And so when we have social distancing requirements, it's easier to give a visual inspection of whether we are adhering to that or not. And so that will be the controlling guideline, will be based on that 6 feet distance from each person. And removing booths, it requires in some instances to remove booths if that cannot take place, or removing tables so that that can happen, and making certain that we adhere to that. Also understand that what we have seen, not only statewide but nationwide, we're not seeing people rushing back into these restaurants and bars and the like, because people are still concerned. But we need to create the opportunity and the space that those that choose to do so, that we do it in the safest manner possible.
What's the status of in-person attendance at churches and parks?
So as we...
As far as churches, the mayor still treats churches as essential businesses. And so individuals with churches are allowed to come in. However, there must be a 6 foot distancing maintained. But they are still considered essential businesses. 6 feet of distancing must be maintained.
And I want to encourage, we know that we have some congregations that are larger than others. And we understand that you cannot get your entire congregation in the church at the 6 foot distance. But we still encourage them to use creative measures. If you have those that want to come to the church and can maintain the 6 foot distance, do so. Others that may be willing to look at the church service through a live broadcast of some sort, to do so. If you have fellowship halls, maybe you create an overflow area where they can sit in the fellowship hall at the 6 foot distance as we require in the sanctuary. And additional services is also an option if they want to add to their services for those people that feel that they need to be present in the building in order for their worship. And so we have to be smart through this. We have to make certain that we are not putting people in undue risk of harm. So we know that at a lot of our churches that there are people of advanced age that go to these services. We know that there are people with underlying health conditions. And so we ask and we call on our faith-based community to speak to their congregation and you know, take the necessary precautions and take seriously those in your congregation that you know have these, that are at the highest risk of contracting this virus and having the worst effect of it, and speak to them and encourage them. If you know that Miss Jackson is of advanced age, then maybe we ask our pastors to call Miss Jackson and say, we ask that you don't come this week because we don't want to put you in undue risk.
The second part, the park.
I'm going to allow him to finish his question, and then I'm coming over
I
here.
asked if the park will be reopened.
The parks have and will be reopened with the exception of its utilization in terms of exercise equipment. Because this virus can live on surfaces for a long period of time, that will be taped up, and that is not to be used. But for people who are merely trying to get physical exercise and relieve some mental stress, that they can do so long as they can adhere to the same social distancing requirements that we have been speaking to throughout this press conference.
Just to be clear, this goes into effect on the 16th, and do we know the impact of having these businesses closed for tax revenues over the last 2 months?
Yeah. The question was, does this order go into effect on the 16th? And do we know the impact, the economic impact on the city based on businesses having been closed thus far? Yes, this goes into effect immediately at the expiration of the order that is presently in place. The reason that I forecast last week that we were going to be doing this, and we're speaking to those guidelines right now, is because we want to give businesses an opportunity to get prepared. In some regards, it will require them to get more protective equipment on hand than they already have on hand. For some businesses, they have not been in contact with their employees for some period of time, and so they need to be able to speak to them. Some of our businesses have taken advantage of the PPE funds that have been made available. And so with those funds, there is a trigger once the city opens up, of when the clock begins to start for their need to begin repayment or looking at that. And they have to have expended a certain amount of those funds towards their employees. And so we're giving them ample opportunity to prepare for those, or the best we can, to give them opportunity to prepare for those things, as well as they may need to make contact with their customer base as well. Was there another part of that question I didn't answer?
I just want to make sure it went into effect on
Yeah.
the 16th when the other one
Yeah.
Tell me the thinking behind the curfew and why you think there needs to be a curfew or loosening restrictions.
Well, a lot of the restrictions that we have put in place are related to the business community. And we have more tools in our shed in order to regulate the business community. But we still want to make certain that people are not going in, by and large, at huge private gatherings where numbers of people can be there. And so because we are opening up businesses, we're not doing it for 24 hours. We're not allowing businesses to be open 24 hours. And so there is little need, unless you are leaving for an essential purpose or an essential need, it still allows you to do that we do all that we can to implement measures that can control crowd size at different locations. Before, when we talked about the stay-at-home order, there was some question as to whether it would be confusing and it would be duplicitous. Now we will not have a stay-at-home order, and so as we are slowly returning or getting to the new normal, we're implementing measures that allow us to do it in a paced and phased regard. And so the curfew is a phased regard with respect to when people can be out. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to give you a chance to reiterate on the requirement of face masks. So are we saying that face masks are now required? It's part of the order that everyone must wear it over the age of 2, and can you define what a public place is?
Let me be clear. The question is there a requirement for face mask? And listen to me. No, there is not a requirement for face mask. While you are in public, there is a requirement for face covering. The reason that I make that distinction is because not every person has the ability to purchase a face mask or has access to a face mask. You may have access to a garment of clothing that you can put on in order to better protect yourself and protect those around you. And so that is why we make the distinction between face mask and face covering, because we're trying to be sensitive to the variation between people's abilities to acquire those things. With respect to, what was the second part of your question?
It says in your order, when in a public place and
Yes.
unable to maintain 6 feet social distancing.
A public place references any place where you may come into contact with a number of people, right? When you're engaged with a number of people. What was the legal definition?
Yes.
I'm gonna allow him to give you the legal definition.
In a public place, it's basically, we're using the lay definition, but it's any place that where you would come into contact with other people and it would be within the 6 feet. Of course, if you're in your own garden and you're working and you're by yourself, of course, there would be no need to wear a face mask. But where you will come into contact with individuals and you cannot maintain a 6 feet separation, then you are required to wear that face covering.
When does it end?
What?
It's a 2-week duration.
It's a 2-week duration, and we will review it at that period of time. Once again, if we see a large spike in our numbers, we will be prepared without hesitation to reimpose the measures that were previously, that would have been previously implemented. All right?